So, Gordon, nice to speak to you again. You wrote a book about Tiswas, is that right?
Well, yes, to say I wrote a book. I put a book together. The full story behind it was that Sally was offered to write a book. They negotiated with her and they couldn't come up to her price. And then they wanted somebody who'd come down to their price, hence me. And so I put the Tiswas file together. Eventually, I'm one of those last-minute merchants, and I ended up being locked in a publisher's office one day, being told to finish it. So that's what I did. I finished the Tiswas file, and it's out there somewhere. I've got a couple of copies, which I'm passing on to my grandchildren. And that's about it. I mean, it was a labour of love. I had trouble getting copyright on a lot of the pictures. Oh, by the way, I can see off thing that Ray's going at the moment. Ray, before you go, I want to tell you something because I know you're a Quo fan. But let me just say that when we had Status Quo on the show, I remember they were getting ready to play, and there was a sketch going on. And there was this bloke in my way. And in my sort of, I'm a TV star, could you get out of my way, please? I'm about to appear for the nation. I said, excuse me. I said, by the way, who are you? And he looked up at me and he said, I'm the Status Quo drummer. And I said, well, as you were, and after you. And I never forget that because I learned to put myself in my own place. Another thing I heard you say, Ray, which was interesting, was that I've been walking across the room listening to John Asher, and at times I thought that they got Chris Tarrant on this show. He is a vocal doppelganger for Tarrant. He really is. And God, I envy that man because he was on the launch pad. And as I say, they were all running this marathon when we joined. Tiswas was like a marathon. And we were still lacing up our trainers. No, it wouldn't be trainers in those days, our pumps. We were lacing up our pumps and trying to catch up with this legend that was Tiswas. And I've got to be honest, I don't think we ever managed it, except, as I said last week, in the regions that had never seen it before, where they absolutely adored us. I'll pause for a breath and a question now, if you like.
You did creature feature quite a lot on the show. Do you have any memories of that? That must have been a bit...
Yes, I remember a snake or a crocodile. Gives you some idea what I'm like zoologically, doesn't it? What's the difference between the snake and the crocodile? I don't know. But I remember it started to tighten itself around my neck. And I thought to myself, production have paid for this, haven't they? They've trained this animal to do this. And I got a bit SH1T scared about that. But no, I can't remember much. Let me just say that stapling machine sent in a question I noticed was who came up with the idea of backwards world of sport? Well, let me jump in straight away. It was called Sport of World because everything was very logical in those days, Sport of World. And it was David McKellar along with Glyn Edwards, and David McKellar and I sat down and wrote it. And it's the first time I discovered that you have to put in a lot of work to scripting for it to actually work. And we did it live, and I suspect as you say, stapling machine, I suspect my radio training came in for that. As I say, we did it live, and I just had to play catch-up looking at the tapes all the time.
Goodbye, and welcome to another Sport of World. I'm Yeltsin Nodrog, and later on I'll be taking you over to the Grey City for some White Hound racing. But first, it's, yes, suction snooker from the Sheffield Hall Cruisefield, where Light Breeze Higgins is attempting to take the World Championship away from the referee. We can now join them for this crucial first game. I think we're going over. Yes, and the referee is now hiding the black ball off the table. Will Light Breeze Higgins find it? No, he's bringing the white ball up the table with his suction cue. It's going to cannon up that pink. Yet he's found the black. Well done. Now he's going to, what's he going to do? He sucked the yellow out to knock the white onto his cue, but the ref's hiding the blue ball again. Will Light Breeze find it? Will he? Yes, he's found it. He's sucked the blue ball out there, no problem. He's got a red to find now. He stalks the referee. He's wiping the chalk off his cue. And he's found that red. The referee's obviously in trouble. What's he going to do now? What is the referee? He's hiding that blue ball again. again, and Higgins doesn't like that. So now it's Higgins for the match. And he's found the blue ball, cannon the white onto the cue, and he's beaten the referee. Well, that was very exciting. I think you'll agree. We hope shooting. But first, I hear we can go to Hatch Brands for some Formula car repairing. Yes, we go over now, and I think we find them at the pit stop. Wilkes using his adjustable spanner, putting in the... There's some great instant panel beating going on there. And look at that roof go back on. Now he's rolling himself back into the bodywork. He's got the final wheel on. And it is probably a flip. He's back out of the race. Another sporting last. I think you have to agree, ladies and gents and hamsters. So that's it from next week's Sport of World. I hope you'll be joining you last week. But before I say hello for today, it's time for the race great.
I do remember that bit because we all came up with ideas, and the motor racing, rebuilding a motor car, a racing car, was my idea. And I remember when I got home, somebody said to me, do you know if the driver died or not? Was that all right to show that? I don't think anybody checked. I don't think, because to me, he didn't. He got up and he rebuilt his car. And also, can I do a shout out to Stan Harding, who came in at the end there, was the floor manager, he was the man who held my hand throughout Tiswas when I didn't feel comfortable, and I felt like I was I'd got newcomer syndrome, where you feel as if you should, imposter syndrome, where you feel you shouldn't be there. And Stan was the man who held my hand and made sure. He said, "You're all right, you're doing okay." He said, "Everybody's treading water at the moment." So shout out to Stan Harding, wherever he is.
I'm going to give you a few. Sorry. I'm going to give you a few names and just see if you have any memories of some of these guys. David Rappaport.
Yes, as I said last week, loved the guy. We got on very, very well. He said he liked me because I didn't ask too many short people questions. And I used to babysit when he went down to the bar at the Holiday Inn next door. I used to babysit for his kiddie while I sat up in the room learning the scripts.
Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah, got on well with Sylvester. Met him a few times since at occasional do's. I remember going backstage at the Alex Theatre in Birmingham to see him. He was in The Invisible Man. I know you expected me to say I couldn't see him at the time. But Sylvester McCoy, yes, great. And little did we know he'd become one of the great Doctor Who's.
And the Phantom Flanflinger.
Well, yes, and sadly, John has gone now, because I was going to ask him, you mentioned about the first Phantom Flanflinger. Is it an urban myth? One of you guys, Peter Ray or yourself, will know, that Jim Davison lays claim to being the first Phantom Flanflinger, as he had to throw on the costume ad lib. But I think that's urban myth. But Benny Mills, who I think, did I mention last week, I booked him to do a convention, a children's entertainers convention I helped organise in Birmingham, and I booked him to make an appearance last year. But because he's 82, he just couldn't make it to it. But I've stayed in touch with him, and Karen, his daughter, is almost his manager and handler.
Guys, I can chip in here. I was speaking to Karen yesterday about the possibility of bringing Benny onto this. She's doing all the shopping for him at the moment. He is self-isolating. He's in his early 80s, of course. We'd love to have him on, but that's not possible at the moment. That's totally understandable. So, Gordon, your suspicions are right. This is a bit of a contentious issue because Jim likes to argue now and again and play up his part. So we know he's a contentious figure, but he did play the Phantom once, according to a properly researched magazine article I saw in the 90s. And because his tattoo was showing, it was kicked off. But the first ever Phantom Flanflinger was a woman, an ATV news researcher called Helen Piddock, who also wrote some of the magazines as well. And
I know the name.
Yeah. We've got. I was scouring through some old footage. We've got some stuff donated to us. We can't show it all in full, but some stuff from '77 and 1978. Some of those Tiswases, which I really would love to play, but the rights issues are a bit flaky. And we saw the Phantom there, looking a bit more slender than Benny. Sorry, Benny, if you're watching, but she.
Well, of course, there was the family. A lot of them, the family were played by Ollie Spencer's kids. Ollie, the floor manager. Ollie, the presenter who never was, I've always said, because, as I say, I wasn't my own greatest fan as a Tiswas presenter, and I remember seeing Ozzy doing warm-up, and he did Barbara Woodshed and stuff like that, and I thought Ollie would have made a cracking Tiswas presenter. I've seen him recently, because he does stand-up now, and he also does a Chubby Brown tribute act when he's working. You should get him on to do it. But thank you to everybody who messaged me after last week's show. It was quite reassuring in a funny sort of way, because we don't see ourselves as others see us, and most of the people, and I guess you're not going to say something to somebody's face that's too hurtful, but most people seem to suggest that the last series we made a reasonable fist of the whole job. So thank you to everybody who did that. Thank you.
And on at the same time, of course, was Swap Shop, and you were a friend of Keith Chegwin, I believe.
Yeah, Cheggers and I went back for about 5 or 6 years, because I did 5 series as his co-presenter on Cheggers Plays Pop, which came out of Manchester. And when I was offered Tiswas, that was, to me, that was a step up, becoming a main presenter. Little did I know. But so that was a step up, and that was bye-bye. Yeah, and I do remember, very competitive Noel Edmonds. Remember he once in an interview said that he was going to leave. He thought it was a good time to leave when Tiswas changed to Us. But he decided to stay on, he said, because he really wanted to trounce Tiswas. He really wanted to smash us in the figures, which in many regions he did. But I thought to myself, no, think it, don't say it, mate. Think it, don't say it.
Was Cheggers Plays Pop fun to do?
Yes, hard work. I'll tell you why it was good fun, because we did all our rehearsals in the morning, because there were no kids there till 6 o'clock in the evening. Then the bands rehearsed in the afternoon, and we had 2 bands on. And so there was always a couple of hours for each band rehearsing. And I remember spending many a happy time. I remember spending a very drunken time in the bar. Just myself and Debbie Harry, because Blondie were on the show. Just myself and Debbie Harry had the bar closed, the shutters came down, and we chatted for 2 hours. It's amazing how you can sober up very quickly for a show like that. I went downstairs, but that's what I do remember. There were lots and lots of bands on Cheggers Plays Pop. In fact, you guys are good at research. If somebody could ever get me the list of bands that were on Cheggers Plays Pop, I'd really like that, because I've been trying to tell people about it. Quo were on it, Slade, who somebody mentioned earlier, were on it, Boomtown Rats. Every time you walked into that studio, there was the sort of history of 80s pop on stage in front of you.
Yeah, I think Deep Purple did one as well.
Yes, but yeah, did they do Tiswas? Did Deep Purple do Tiswas?
I don't think they ever performed. I think they appeared. I think they got gunched a couple of times, but I don't think they ever did.
I remember chatting behind the camera to Lemmy from Motorhead. Was quite bizarre, isn't it? You're watching something like Frank Castle, Spike Miller getting flammed, while you're chatting to Lemmy from Motorhead or Bob Geldof.
It did seem that Tiswas attracted the heavy metal fans.
Yes, well, if you think about it, that Saturday morning. Look at me on a Saturday morning, dressing down. Can't be asked to get ready yet, and drag the kids. If you've got kids, drag them down, because you need an excuse to ogle Sally. And there's cartoons on which you don't need any brain cells to watch. It's perfect hangover fodder, isn't it?
Yeah. And one sketch, I don't know if this is right, but I believe one sketch you did on Tiswas, I think, did it have your parents involved?
Yes, I've got that somewhere. If I haven't, I'm going to go begging for it. The idea was that it was the end of the show and our parents had come to pick us up. So it's like the end of a children's party, right? And our parents had come to pick us up. My dad loved it, because my dad had been a TV announcer for ATV and Central and a children's presenter. He used to present a show called Tinker and Tucker. Imagine the limericks from that were thrown at me in the playground when I was a kid. So he came along with my mum. And I've got a feeling, gives you some idea about the generational thing. I think my dad picked them, they were putting on our coats and we were going, oh, Dad, I want to play, and all. I think my dad actually smacked me round the head and thought nothing of it. But I that could be just my memory having fun. But yes, that was it. And the idea was, and all our parents came up, Sally's parents came up, Foggy's parents came up, and the idea was they'd come to pick us up at the end of the show.
Great.
Well,
Did you get recognised in the street a lot at that time, or was it, you weren't aware?
Social workers, probation officers, prison governors. Yeah.
I get that as well.
I still do. Yes, I mean, I used to get. I tell you where it's basically because you could tell the regions as well. Because when I started to do a few gigs, and when you got to a gig in, say, Tunbridge Wells or London early, you'd go for a walk or a drink. And that's when you found out which region to take to the heart. And when I was doing some working men's clubs up in Tyneside, that's when it really came from the streets. Tyneside seemed to love us, as I mentioned last week, because they took us first. They'd not seen Chris and Lenny, didn't mean a thing to them. So there was no act to follow.
What sort of thing did you do in the working men's clubs?
I did. It's funny you should say that, because it's how I got into magic. Because I met Clive Webb on the show. I said, I've got a gig. It's paying 400 quid. I've got to take it along a Phantom Flan Flinger. What can I do? He said, well, do some comedy magic. He said, I'll lend you some. I said, oh, really? I didn't know you guys were allowed to. He said, oh, blimey. He said, they're idiots. They even have a weekly magazine. I never forget him said they have a weekly magazine, magicians do. So that's how I got into magic, and I bought myself some props. So I did Paul Daniels type audience participation stuff on stage with the pass the flan and party games like that. And a mate of mine used to drive up as the Phantom Flan Flinger. I used to take an act round called I think it was the Phantom's Tea Party or something like that. And because of the book that you mentioned earlier, full circle, because of the book you mentioned earlier, we put the sheet music to the Tiswas theme in it, which meant I'd always got the dots to give to the musos in working men's clubs. And I don't know if Ray's worked working men's clubs, but he always had a bloke on piano and a bloke on drums. And the idea that he got sheet music was always impressive to the pianist. And I used to give him the sheet music. And so when they introduced me, it was da-da-da, 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 and I came onto that, and the rest was downhill because it was a crap act, but never mind. 300 quid, mate.
Sounds brilliant. I'd have loved to see that.
Listen, I've got to go in a minute. I'll tell you why. Yeah. My battery's flat in the car, okay, and the bloke from the AAAA is turning up any minute now. Do you know that the AAAA, it's a motor organisation for drunks, and they're about to turn up soon, so I'll have to go if you hear the bell go.
Can I give a shout out to Lord of Cake, who should really be like the Tiswas Wikipedia page? Good on you.
He's pretty good. I assume from the tone of your message that he's praising status quo.
No. He's just given a discography of when Gillan was on and Purple and all that.
So you're a heavy rock fan, Ray, and it appealed to you.
I put on a few pounds during isolation. Yes,
and Tiswas appealed to you, obviously.
Look, if you're going to laugh on your own, Pete, move about a bit so I look popular. Sorry, I missed that. I was showing off.
Did
I like Tiswas? Did
you watch the last series of Tiswas, or were you mainly a Tarrant person?
I was mainly a Sally person, but then again, I was an impressionable age. I kind of watched it all the way through, and OTT I thought deserved a better run than it had. Certainly deserved better press than it got. But the only stuff that I really missed out on was the early John days, because obviously being a Londoner in pre-cable days, we didn't get to see other regions. But basically, it was a case of Noel Edmonds or people chucking muck around with heavy metal. So it kind of made its own decision. I
remember interviewing Status Quo when I was in local radio at the place in Hamley, and they played to 500 people, and afterwards we were having drinks together, and it's, you know how you take on advice for the rest of your life. Francis Rossi said to me, he said, "Oh, don't order lager and lime." I said, "Why not?" He said, "You'll never have children, son. You'll never have children."
Thanks for joining us again, Gordon. You've found Legion of fans. So say goodbye, John.
Farewell,
Bye,
Gordon.
gang. Bye.
And 50 Shades of Ray.
Oh, you snuck it in. Thank you very much. It's been a real blast this morning, and lots of memories, and great meeting Gordon and John, and yeah, everyone. Cheers, guys.